All right, well, good evening. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Elizabeth Leslie Gassaway, and I'm the Vice President of the League of Women Voters of El Dorado County, and I'm also an El Dorado Hills resident. I live just down the road. So I'd like to welcome you to this forum. Thank you very much for being here, and also thank you to our candidates for agreeing to come to the forum this evening. For those of you that don't know, the League of Women Voters was started in 1920 after winning the right to vote for women. That was only 102 years ago, just one lifetime. So this is your reminder to make sure that you register and vote in the upcoming November election. If you have questions about voter registration or voting, feel free to see any of the volunteers here afterwards and we can answer any questions you might have. Keep in mind that voters can register to vote all the way up till election day. You can actually do same-day voter registration. So we hope that you'll participate. Democracy needs everyone, and again, come see me or one of the volunteers if you need help understanding how to register. I'd also like to thank the CSD for allowing us to use this facility tonight, and especially to Brittany, who helped me get this event together. I'd also like to thank the volunteers that are here tonight. If you can raise your hand, my League volunteers. Raise your hand, League volunteers. Okay, great. Thank you so much for being here. Also, if you have questions this evening, you may raise your hand and one of our volunteers will come around with an index card and a pencil and you can write your questions there, give them back to the volunteer, and if they have not already been asked, they will make their way up to me. Please know that the questions that we have been submitted by voters from the community and the candidates have not seen them prior to me asking these questions this evening. We want to remind you about the forum rules tonight. They call for strict adherence to the terms of civil discourse by both the candidates and our audience. If anyone acts unruly, candidates or audience, we will shut down the forum. So I know that you will act and have all your good manners in place for this evening. It is in that spirit that we are here this evening to engage in this vital part of our democratic process. So again, thank you so much for being here. Also a note about filming. This will be taped and available on YouTube in the next day or so. You'll be able to find it on the League's website, which is listed here on the banner. You'll also be able to find it in our online voter guide, Voter's Edge. Thank you to Access El Dorado TV for allowing this filming tonight. Okay, and with that, I'd like to go over some of the forum rules for the timing. Can you raise your hand, timer? Ruth is here timing today. You will see she has two paddles. One says 30 seconds, start wrapping it up, and one says stop. You know what that means. Okay, so with that, our forum rules for tonight, we're using what we call the 2-2-2 format. So you'll have 2 minutes for your opening statements, you'll have 2 minutes to answer the questions, and 2 minutes for your closing statements. As far as the order for opening statements, we are going in, we did a drawing earlier for opening and for closing, but the questions will start in alphabetical order starting with Heidi. So that means for the first opening statement, we will be starting with Steve this evening. Okay, so are you ready to get started with your opening statement?
You bet I am, thank you.
You have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to congratulate the CSD. This is their 60th anniversary. This year is. They've been around here a long time now. They've done a lot of work around here. And yeah, we're here because we think we can get more work done than what has been done. I want to introduce to you first, though, my wife. She's sitting in the back there. Her name is Beth. We got married back in 1964, just like the rest of you. And in any case, we have 2 sons. One of them lives here in El Dorado Hills. His name is Mark Ferry, and if you ride a bike, you know who Mark Ferry is. If you're on the trails at all, he is in charge of cycling development. He runs, I believe it's 8 or 9 high school mountain bike teams, and he's part of the Clipped In for Life organization. Just doing a great job doing that, and being part of that with him, it's just been a real pleasure to watch all that come together. Why am I running for the EDHCSD board? Because I think the board needs some help. You're going to hear more about this in a little while during the question and answer time. But the things that in particular I want to see happen, and one thing in particular is to put out the lawsuits that are against this agency and also I might add against the county, that we shouldn't be an agency that in fact is being sued by our own community. So that's one of my hopeful solutions tonight to get to. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next opening statement will be from Michael.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Thanks again for coming out. And of course, thank you to the CSD for allowing us to use the facility this evening. And also thank you, Elizabeth, and the League of Women Voters for actually putting this event together and making it all possible. So thank you so much for that. As for why am I running? I love everything that this community has or that it represents. I love the parks. I love the trails. I love all the open space that we have access to. I want to make sure that we continue to have top-notch parks. I want to make sure that we continue to do what we can to preserve that open space. I want to do everything that I can to continue to move us forward on this path of being the greatest community in the area. Why do you think everyone wants to continue to move here? Because we have such great facilities. So I feel as though we have done a tremendous amount the last 4 years, and I want to make sure that we see those things continue forward for generations yet, to be able to experience those same things. So I have kept an open mind. I think things through. I'm not always, I listen to all the voices in the room, not just the loudest voices when making decisions. And I believe that I have demonstrated that throughout the last 4 years while sitting on the board. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, next up is Louis. 2 minutes for your opening statement.
Well, I'm just happy to be here. Been here about 5 years now. My biggest reasons for being up here is to make this community the best it can be. I think that's a little bit corny, but I came up with it when I had to put it on the bottom of my tagline. I've got 4 kids. 2 of them are here. Miranda in the pink dress and Clark there in the gray shirt. My wife Bonnie, she's a teacher over at Valley View Montessori. I've always been a bit envious of her and her family. They're all teachers. Public service has been something I've always aspired to. I studied civil engineering with a specialty, whenever I could. I took all my electives in architecture and city planning just because I have a big interest in making this world as good as it can be. And I feel as if construction's really been a great career for me. It's been an opportunity for me to build a lot of really fantastic projects that I can point to. I love being able to share that with people I know and drive by those places. One of the reasons I'm wanting to be on the board of the CSD is because I think this is pretty much one of the best communities I've ever come across. I mean, my wife and I, when we were looking, I grew up in Clovis, she's from the East Bay, we were living in the East Bay about 5 years ago, and my goal was, our goal as a family really, when we just had actually the 2 oldest kids, and we were looking to move into a community where we felt we could be there for the life of our kids. And so I feel like this is that community. I feel happy to be here. I've learned a lot over the last couple of years since that kind of like rekindling of that college goal of getting involved in public service. This opportunity really appeals to me because I see all the parks that we've got under development, Bass Lake being a big one that's been talked about since I moved here 5 years ago, and I'd really like to put some of my development and construction experience into that and on these other projects we have going on.
Thank you very much. Heidi, you have 2 minutes.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I have some written comments, so forgive me, but I'm going to read, and I usually read pretty fast. So, good evening. I want to begin by thanking the League for putting on this forum, and I want to thank my fellow candidates for participating as well. It's really been great getting to know you all, and I'm so pleased that this race has been cordial, a true testament for how races can be run. My name is Heidi Hanneman. I'm a wife, mother, public servant, and 38-year resident of El Dorado Hills. I grew up here attending our local schools and participating in CSD programs. After college, my husband and I came back to El Dorado Hills and planted our own roots, building our own home in Waterford. I've seen a lot of changes over the years. I know how good we have it, but there's always room for new ideas and improvement to keep El Dorado Hills a truly one-of-a-kind place. Having now raised my own children here, I know the importance of good sports and extracurricular programming, as well as access to well-maintained parks. In fact, I worked to bring one to fruition many years ago when I saw a need. And living down the road from my parents, I also know our seniors have needs too. I was appointed to the board in June 2021 and have already established a record of accessibility, critical thinking, and fiscal conservatism. I'm proud of the work I've done so far and hope you will allow me the opportunity to continue on your behalf. With nearly 25 years of public service at the California Legislature, I come equipped with a public policy background and the unique skill set of finding solutions to tough issues. We have some challenges ahead as we continue to grow at a rapid pace. I know I could be a leader on that front to help us get in the best possible position for preserving our small town feel while ensuring we have the modern amenities and programs we need for all of our residents. The CSD is the only government agency we have in El Dorado Hills, so I'm humbly asking for your vote today so I can help ensure good governance, excellent programming, and great parks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Heidi. And for our first question, we'll be beginning in alphabetical order, so Heidi will be answering the question first, and then we'll trade off as we go through each question, so you won't always be first. Okay, so our first question is related to local youth sports. The fourth largest youth sports groups in El Dorado Hills include EDH Taz Swim Team, EDH Lacrosse, EDH Little League, and EDH Soccer Club. During the last season, these teams served collectively over 5,000 children. These sports groups have had a tough time meeting the needs of the community due to issues with the CSD, like lack of field, pool, and other facility availability, lack of lighted synthetic fields, extended field closures, and extremely high rental fees. How do you plan to address the needs of youth in our community and plan to be supportive of the nonprofit sports groups?
Yeah, thank you. This is something that just in the last month, Director Martinelli and I sit on the subcommittee that has met with some of the groups who've come and expressed their frustration, mainly over field allocation policy. And it really unearthed a lot of things we need to address. And I know we've asked staff to start, they have a subcommittee group that's meeting now and going through our policies and seeing what changes may or may not need to happen. We definitely need more fields. It's one of the things I have on the back of my card, if you picked up my card, is access to more fields for a variety of sports. Soccer is definitely our biggest sport, but we have lots. We have Little League, softball. I know rugby's maybe interested. So with the limited resources, we're trying to cobble together the best plan we can. One thing I did ask staff to do as a result of the meeting we had a few weeks ago was to revisit in the short term all of our joint use agreements or possibilities of joint use agreements with our local schools. The first one that comes to mind, I was just speaking to the gentleman from Little League about this, is Jackson School. We do not have a joint use agreement with them. That's a field we may be able to leverage right away to get our kids some more access. So I'm actively thinking about this. I can't promise you I have all the solutions, but I know that our subcommittee is working hard on it, and I'm hoping that we can have some more options for our kids.
Thank you. Louis, you're next. And please let me know if you'd like me to repeat any questions.
Okay, thank you. I do believe that we do have to put a little bit more emphasis on forward planning. I do think that we could have more fields at this point if we had planned a little bit further ahead. I think that these projects like Bass Lake, I know when I moved here 5 years ago, it was talked about, it was around the corner, and I was hoping that it would be here by maybe now or in the next year or two, but I know it still has a few more steps to becoming complete. I think that we could work a lot with the school districts to see what kind of possibilities exist for the long term. This is quite long term, but it is important to plan ahead. One of the things that I actually didn't realize was so valuable about my community, I grew up in Clovis, California, was that they had a very long planned, thought through process for how the city was going to grow and develop, and it was very tightly woven with the school district. The school district there was very well known for having some of the best facilities in the state. And that all came from visionary leadership from Doc Buchanan, our superintendent for many decades. And that was something I took for granted. And I moved to other communities throughout California over the years after I graduated high school. And I was actually surprised. I mean, I met my wife and she's like, Clovis, I hate Clovis. I have to go out there for volleyball all the time because they have all the facilities. And so I feel like there's just a lot more we could do. I mean, we could learn from some of the bigger communities that are near us, like Folsom and Roseville, about how they've planned ahead. We're not going to get that big, and I think it's important that we don't, because this is a different community. But I do think that planning ahead, thinking through what those long-term, medium, and short-term goals, and I think Heidi's plan for joint use agreements is a very good one, to get ahead of the short-term need to use the fields that are available, maybe improve those fields as they exist right now for our kids.
Thank you. Michael?
All right, as others have already mentioned, there's no doubt that field space is definitely a challenge, and it continues to be. As this community continues to grow, of course, the sport groups also continue to grow. The first thing that I would like to see done, and this was touched on by Director Hanneman, and we're in the process of putting together and establishing a working group that brings all the sport groups together, brings softball together, brings Little League together, brings soccer together, brings lacrosse together. And let's try and all figure out together, collaborate with one another, how can we better utilize the existing facilities, such as using the baseball fields to maybe also accommodate softball, to try and just use the existing facilities maybe a little bit more efficiently, pushing out fences to where they can accommodate baseball again and softball, and yet at the same time not impede on soccer or any of the other user groups. So just trying to get together, taking a look at what the existing field allocation policy looks like, and maybe revisit it. What works best for all, so that all can use the existing facilities, so that there isn't a field out there. There's nothing more frustrating than me driving by here and seeing that there is a field that's there but it's not being used. So I'd like to really start there, is really just see what we have available, what can we use more efficiently, and come together, get all the groups together, take a look at joint use agreements, how can they be reconfigured to be more accommodating, so that we can use more of the fields that are here, while at the same time be forward thinking, looking at Bass Lake, looking at some of these other facilities, where can we find better fields to grow and expand into as the community continues to grow.
Thank you. Steve?
So my answer is a little bit different than the others. In particular, we don't have enough money coming into the CSD to do the things that we're talking about up here. And we're not going to have enough money until we become a city. And when we become a city, we will get approximately $120 million a year out of the county to actually run this city. The county runs on a $300 million, a little more than that actually, $300 million budget. We actually pay into it roughly 28% according to the CAO in District 1 alone. In District 2, my guess is we're in for another 10%. That's 40%, 40% of the budget. We have to become a city if we're ever going to get to where we want to go to. If you decide to stay with just trying to make the CSD work better, I've been watching this for 22 years. My grandchildren were the age of these young people sitting right here in the front row when we first got here. In fact, some of them were born here. And some of them, when they finally grew up, and my youngest is now 18, the fields have always been a problem. The space has always been a problem. The time has always been a problem, and it hasn't gotten better. We built more fields. We built the field down there on Sophia Parkway and the one up here on the hill. I forget the name of them offhand right quick, but we have to decide what we're going to be when we grow up. We have 50,547 people living in El Dorado Hills. The general plan of this county calls for 65,000 people to be living here, and we are never going to accomplish the fields that we need with those kind of numbers. Thank you.
Thank you. For this next question, Louis, you'll be answering first, and then Michael, you'll follow. How do you plan to make EDH more bike-friendly and interconnected like Folsom, so families and neighborhoods can ride bikes to town center safely?
Well, that's actually an interesting question, because the county is in charge of most of the roadways in El Dorado Hills. So I actually came across this issue because when I was looking at the brand new bike path that goes in on Silver Valley, I was very surprised to find out that there was no crossing across Silver Valley to connect it to the New York Creek Trail. There's a section of the paved section off the New York Creek Bridge that was newly constructed that goes out to Silver Valley. And I just thought, why is that not connected? And so I contacted the county many years ago, and that was completed. And they basically, I think I may have contacted the CSD, and they pointed me to the county. And the county said, you know, well, we didn't budget for that, and it's basically not coordinated. I mean, so that's one of the things I think Steve is hitting on, is that we live in an unincorporated part of the county. We are the largest economic and population center of the county, so there is a lot of important questions to be thought through, and you know, through Steve's encouragement and the CSD's current actions of the last few years, they have done a lot of those steps to look into what cityhood would mean, how much it could cost, how it would be structured. There are different agencies like LAFCO that need to approve those kind of things in the state of California. I think there's a lot to be said for it, but to get back to bike paths and how they need to be structured and built to be more connected like Folsom, I do think at the present time our best path forward is to work more closely and more aligned with the county, because right now the county owns a lot of the right-of-ways. They're the ones that have the budgets. They build the bike pathways in our city. It's not technically a city, but in El Dorado Hills. So in order to make that happen, I mean, I've been on the developer side, and I've seen how when you're doing a development, you have to connect all of the land that's purchased with each other. You know, this is 10, 15 years ahead of when you need it.
Thank you. Michael?
Yes, as someone that actually has been starting to bike more frequently here within the last month, I think that this is something that I would definitely like to look into more so. I do believe that it is, there's three parts to it. Number one is, yes, the county does, or is for the most part responsible for the bike paths in the area. So I think that, yes, working more closely with the county and collaborating with them to see what it is that we can do to make these trails more accessible, safer, and so forth. The next thing too that needs to be looked at somehow, some way is some form of greater law enforcement presence, because the traffic and the way that people drive is just, it's crazy. So definitely not a safe thing, you know, when dealing with the traffic that's around here and these drivers and so forth. I would say the next thing too is the CSD has done a tremendous job mapping out a lot of the trails that are out there. So I think that doing greater outreach to the general public and letting everyone know that, look, we have a map, a trail map here that's outlined well, and having just, you know, a greater overview and feel for the paths that get you to and from certain areas to town, and just working more closely too with those that like to bike and so forth, and figure out from them what they feel as though can be done a little bit better to make these trails a little bit more safely. So I would say that those three areas would be a good place to start.
Thank you. Steve?
First of all, I'd like to discuss what different kind of trails there are. There are what we call single track trails, and that's what mountain bikes ride on, and they're everywhere. They look like deer trails. They look like they came out of the Integrated Biological Corridors section of the general plan. And so when you see the little deer trails going through, that's most likely a mountain bike trail. And a lot of private property owners don't like the idea that their property is being ridden over, but it does get ridden over. Secondarily are the trails that are called Class A or Class 1 trails, which are mostly for regular street bikes. You even see the part where the bikes can ride in the street that they haven't marked off and so forth. So there's two different kind of trails. When we become a city, and I am going to push the cityhood effort all night long tonight, so in case you're wondering, when we become a city, we don't ask the county anymore. We don't ask the county if we can open up Branch Ravine. We open it up, but we don't open it up because the people here in El Dorado Hills want to open it up or don't want to. We need to start to govern ourselves. And if we're not grown up enough to govern ourselves, that'd be a terrible shame, because I know we're grown up enough. I know enough people here that believe and love in their independence and having the ability to govern yourself right here, where you don't have the county telling you what to do. You get to do it right here. and I'm suggesting clearly that you do that. When I talked to my son Mark, and he's riding down the trail at Browns Ravine, that was just opened up, and they're, of course, now going back and forth with a few property owners who don't want it to be opened up, so that will go away or get settled in the meantime. But those kind of things need to be done, and they should be done at the city level.
Thank you very much. Heidi?
Okay, so slightly different take, just that I think actually the CSD's been doing a pretty good job on this. Director Martinelli mentioned the trail map we just released a few months ago. I don't know if we had a group working on that as far as bikers coming in and helping them with the connectivity. If there's more to be done, I have not been contacted by anyone about the connectivity issues with our bike trails. So happy to listen, always an open ear to see if more can be done, and if we need to have another group we create to sit down with some maps and see where we have gaps. That's what I'm happy to do. Thank you, Steve, for educating me on the two different trails. I didn't even know. I'm not a bike rider, but I know that we have in our community, and if there's more work to be done, I'm happy to help facilitate that.
Thank you. This next question will start with Michael. There is a large senior population in EDH. What can you advocate for them besides playing fields?
Well, I think that there's definitely needs to be some more work done for the seniors in our community. These sometimes it's overlooked, and I know that it's been really challenging, of course, coming out of a pandemic and all the different regulations and so forth that we had to be in compliance with. But I will definitely continue to do everything that I can to make sure that we have adequate programming for our seniors in this community, make sure that they are well taken care of, to make sure that they continue to meet with friends and have a good time and have that sense of community. After all, the seniors are very, very important, and I will continue to do everything that I possibly can to make sure that that programming is there for them. So I would love to work, more closely with the senior services and make sure that we deliver for them on every way that we possibly can.
Thank you. Steve?
Well, I am the senior sitting up here. And I wish I was real young again sometimes, but I know a lot of seniors. I live in a senior community, 55 and over, down in Heritage. I enjoy the trails there. I walk about 4 or 5 miles a day, 5 or 6 days a week. And I enjoy that very much, and it's flat down there, so I can do that. I used to live in Serrano, and we walked the same amount, and I ran for a lot of years. But that's all up and downhill, so the seniors get to the point where getting up those hills sometimes is a little tough. So having trails for the seniors is one thing. Secondarily, and some of you may know a lady by the name of Betty January. Betty January is the senior premier #1 person in this city, period, in my humble opinion. Betty wants to see us build a senior facility called the Center for the Ages down here by the fire department on Wilson Way. And it would be on the top part of what is presently the old golf course. And it would be a center that needs to get funded. So we asked, the CSD, do we have the money to do that? No, we don't. So how do we get it done? And that's the kind of thing we have to do some serious thinking about. So one way to get it done would be to start not a GoFundMe account, but an account where people could say, hey, I want to leave 20 grand out of my estate when I die, and I'm going to leave it to the senior program. Or they can create another program, something, but we got to figure a way to get this kind of stuff done. I look at El Dorado Hills. I've been here 22 years. My whole family has been raised here to a large degree. I see this as my hometown, Newport Beach. I see town center as Balboa Island. Anybody that's ever been there knows exactly what I'm talking about. If you haven't been there, you should go. But this is a very high-end place, and we need to get it to the point where it really sparkles. Thank you.
Heidi?
So last I checked, we have a senior center. It's the old fire department across from Serrano Parkway, and our numbers have actually been dropping at that senior center, likely because of the pandemic, right? This is a new world we're in as far as how we're going to congregate our seniors. My battery's going up, but so putting some more forward thinking maybe into maybe not a place, but more programming, outdoor programming. I know we've been trying to bring out more bocce ball and thank you, Louis. More bocce ball and pickleball, which seems to be something a lot of seniors have been enjoying. And then One thing that I've been advocating for, Steve's advocating for cityhood, one thing I've been advocating for is a short course golf course. And the reason I like that is because it does appeal to all ages. You can have 3 to 4 generations out in a 9-hole short course. And I am talking about the old golf course area. Putting something like that, that's another thing that really could be beneficial to the entire community, seniors to children. So that's the activities, I think, is where we could do a little more concentration.
Thank you. Louis?
My mother-in-law followed us up here, and she's loved living here. We kind of keep her busy watching all 4 of our kids most of the time, but she does find that the available options in this community for meeting other seniors has been really a good opportunity for her to meet others, and she's made some really good friends. I don't know if I'll have to ask her if she's been to the Gilmore Senior Center. I don't think she's been able to, but I know that facility is looking at doing some renovations and upgrades, and I've heard about the fire station senior center, which I think would be a great addition to the community. I know right now it's just looking at the best piece of land for accessibility and programming that. So one of the things I don't know all the details about the senior programs at the moment, but one thing I do look forward to if I'm elected to the board is learning about all the different programs that the CSD offers, and getting into the weeds of what we can do to allocate budgets to meet those priorities. I know that this community has a very sizable senior population, and it would be really great to make sure that we meet them and think of all of the needs that they have, and maybe put together some sessions where we could get some input from those seniors and what they're looking for in the future. And my big kind of goal in being on board is to take all the information to understand the wide picture of what we're dealing with, and then try to make some specific goals for us to kind of target all of our main populations, be it seniors, kids, middle-aged, everyone. Just looking forward to that, and I know that because this is a city that is growing at the moment, and I think we do need to think about how do we prioritize all those things all at once.
Thank you. This next question will begin with you, Steve. You mentioned fields, but the oldest sports organization in town is nearly 60 years old, the Taz swim team. Taz turns away families every year because of a lack of pool time. Tonight's an example. We'd love to be running a clinic, but water polo has the pool. A second pool was recommended in the 2007 master plan. Since then, we've added 25,000 residents and 0 pools. What is your plan specifically to address the aquatics needs of the community?
It's not the same plan that they've been using for the last several years, of course. I'll let you think on that just for a second. We need another pool, there's no question about it. My humble opinion is it ought to go up to Bass Lake and put it there. I would also build a wintertime sports facility up there where they could do some wrestling and basketball and things like that. But that should have, we have this down here. This was built, I believe, in 1986 or somewhere in that neighborhood. There was 15,000 people here. We have 50,000 people there now and not another pool. I mean, that's just nuts. So pools are very expensive. If you talk to the general manager, he'll tell you that is a nasty number to have to deal with. But that's what we do. You become a city, we're going to have a little more money in the bank to deal with. So when we become a city, and I'm looking forward to that happening, seeing a pool go into Bass Lake or buying another piece of property up there close, because there's property up there along Bass Lake Road that is not part of the Bass Lake specific plan, that maybe we could expand and do something there rather than at Bass Lake if there's some ecological reasons that we shouldn't do it at Bass Lake. In any case, that's what I would do. There's no question we need another pool, and that ought to be done. Ought to be done now. And it probably won't get done until we become a city.
Thank you. Heidi.
Okay, I'll try my mic again, see if it works. I'm glad this came back up because I got the first question about sports fields. We didn't really touch on pools, and the first thing that came to mind. So first of all, I'm a former Taz swimmer. I see the gentleman with his Taz hat back when it was at Burleson Park. And there's no doubt we need more more pools, we need more access to pools, but it is an incredibly expensive venture, and I don't know how we get there. I'm just going to be honest, it's a super expensive venture. Two things that have come to mind and I brought up to the board has been expansion of our current pool. I mean, we have room behind where we're at, so, is there a way for us to add more facilities going back with our current situation right here? And another situation that we brought up, or Director Martinelli and I actually met with some representatives from the high school district, and they have 200 acres down on the south of 50, which could really be an incredible location for multiple sports, including, a world-class aquatic facility. And, is that something we could do a public-private partnership on? What's the way to get there? Because, as we all said, they're expensive ventures. So those are two ideas that come to my mind, finding the right location. The two are either here or moving down south of 50.
Thank you. Lewis?
I agree with the fact that the school districts are critical to this because the schools are going to have swim meets, they're going to have swim teams, they're going to have different needs as well as the CSD. So I think with the cost of such a large aquatic center that we'd like to build, it does make sense that 15,000 people to 50 means we need another facility. And I think that that's something that the school district and the CSD could work together. I haven't personally had a chance. I did talk to some people that I know that are kind of loosely connected to the school district. They say that's possible. I haven't been able to get into more details yet. I've heard that there's some plans to bring in some outside models from other people I've talked to for such a cost sharing, maybe even private. I don't know if the private makes sense just because of the funding. I doubt there'd be anyone willing to fund that, but I do think the best option forward would be to find a location that either here at the south, Latrobe, where the future high school, I think overall, I'd be really curious to talk to the high school district about that area. I do think that, even though that high school is out a ways because of enrollment issues, not having enough enrollment to get the funding, we do need to think ahead about using some of that land that's going to be for sports facilities, such as an aquatic center that could meet the high class needs of our community.
Thank you. Michael?
All right, and I hate to be somewhat repetitive here, but really just need to have a short-term solution and a long-term solution. The short-term solution, I believe, is let's get together, let's talk about it, let's establish, let's have a rec and volunteer committee meeting and get the entities together to see how we can use the existing facilities better, more efficiently. If it is expanding the pool so that more kids can basically get in there at any given time. But I think that that's a good short-term solution, is to try and get together, let's have a rec and volunteer session and try and see what options we have, who's using it when, and so forth, and really try and figure out how we can better use that pool throughout the day. Long-term, obviously, we do need to try and find and look for another location, but it's with enrollment numbers and, of course, working with the high school district, it's something that's being looked at, and of course it makes sense to do it down south of 50 because that's where all the growth is going to be. We're just not there yet. So we must do a better job somehow, some way. Let's get together and try and figure out a way how we can better utilize the existing facility more efficiently.
Thank you. The next question, Heidi, you will start first. The CSD enforces rules like CCRs, but does not follow them. What will you do to ensure the CSD goes by the same rules and standards of El Dorado County, i.e. the dark sky permits?
Okay. I sit on one of the committees that actually hears some of the CCNR violations. And that's one thing that motivated me actually to put my name in for the board last year and continue on, is maintaining the beautiful area that we have. I've been kind of a stickler about the rules, the CCNR rules that I see violated. I've pretty much, anyone that's appealed, except for one occasion, I think, I said, I'm sorry, you're not going to get an appeal. most of the time it's been forwarded on to the board. On the dark sky, I'm not familiar with that. I don't know enough about it. It's been talked to me. I know one neighborhood, I think, that says there's a dark sky, but yet they have lights around their own clubhouse. So I would have to do a little more research on that as far as, is this a county ordinance that no one's following? Because I don't see anyone really following the dark sky ordinance if that's the case. But I'm happy to do a little more digging on that. I just don't have an answer on that one.
Thank you. Lewis?
I did forget to mention that I'm on the CCNR review committee for the last year, so that's something I have been getting involved with the CSD. It's a volunteer position that I've had a chance to help kind of use some of my background to help review some of those situations and come up with good solutions with residents. I do think the dark sky is an interesting one. I've heard that talked about, and I think that what I'm hearing on that is that there's a lot of people that want to keep their neighborhoods kind of pristine. You know, they want their neighborhoods to be, I mean, one of the nice things I think about El Dorado Hills is that we don't have a lot of glaring street lights. I think that's a very nice thing. I actually do enjoy that, and I know a lot of other people do too. I think that when it comes to public spaces, there is an issue of, you know, balancing that. You've got the need to keep public spaces like parking lots and street areas that are frequented past the night hours in, especially the winter when it gets dark early, safe, you know, and so I think that is very important as well. So there's going to be some give and take, I think, with that. I think that the Dark Sky Initiative, which I don't know, I have tried to understand that as an actual ordinance. Because I've heard it brought up. I don't know if it is technically an enforceable ordinance, but I know it's an aspiration and a goal, and is commendable. I think as somebody who loves the outdoors, I mean, one of the most beautiful things is to be able to look up and see the night sky in all splendor. So it's a nice thing to have a pretty dark area here, and I know that, you know, I'd be happy to hear people's concerns about parks that have too bright of lights, and I know that's been an issue in some areas, Heritage being the most obvious one recently. I do think that it's important to, time's up. Sorry.
Thank you. Michael?
All right, so after being, you know, after being on the board now for 4 years, I will admit there's still a lot of things that I need to learn. And I'd say this is one that they could use a little bit more, a deeper dive into, but I guess I would like to ask the county what their definition of the dark sky really is. I mean, we just spoke about the field allocation or the field availability issue. We have to get creative in terms of having some means of lighting out there. So long as it's done with the technology that's out there these days, it can be done right, it can be done responsibly, it can be done efficiently. And at the same time, more kids can get out and play. We want kids to get out and play. And so I think that that's something that needs to be looked at and explored more so. And it's just something that we need to look at a little bit more so. And as for the DRC side of things, I sit on that same committee as well, and as far as I know, we do a pretty darn good job hearing each resident out. Does it comply, does it not? And we make a decision based upon what the CCNRs say. So I'm not really familiar with anything that I'm aware of that would say anything otherwise. I mean, obviously, we want our community to live in this. We want the home values to stay where they are. So we have every reason to make sure that those CCNRs are in fact enforced.
Thank you. Steve?
Over the last several years, literally several years, I have sat on the El Dorado County Housing Task Force. I've helped put the general plan together for the housing element, the land use element, integrated biological corridors, the Oak Tree Management Plan. And we get to the CCNRs here, and the question about CCNRs really, we have about 50 CCNRs in El Dorado Hills, which means those are 50 communities that do not have an HOA. We also have a whole bunch that have HOAs where they take care of their own roads. So we have all these CCNR communities that need to have the roads taken care of. We were a city, we could actually take care of them. if you go through the cul-de-sacs down here in Governor's Village and St. Andrews Village and all that, you'll find that the garbage trucks have torn those places up, and they're not fixing them, and the county's not fixing them, but the county's supposed to. I want to also give you an insight into Dark Skies community. I was told El Dorado Hills was a Dark Skies community by a member of our Board of Supervisors roughly 5 years ago, before John Heidel was the guy before that. And he said, Steve, this is a Dark Skies community. And I told him, I said, no, it's not. Well, it is. Well, then why are the lights on over here at Town Center at 2 o'clock in the morning? I don't know. So then I checked out. Dark Skies is a nonprofit, and they commit to cities and agencies who put in communities such as the Heritage Community to say, okay, you're approved by us as a Dark Skies community. Does that make sense? So I look at it and say, well, it's real nice that some people can give us that, but what real import does that have on the county? There is no ordinance, there's nothing you're violating, it's just what it is. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Louis, you'll be taking this question first. Do you believe it is appropriate for the CSD to seek to recover 100% of costs from nonprofit youth sports organizations? Should the CSD General Fund support youth sports that the EDH taxpayers' children participate in?
I did sit in on the subcommittee that Heidi and Mike were chairing a couple weeks ago, and yeah, it was interesting to hear and to get involved with that. You know, I do think it's really important that we make sure that our community sports organizations are taken care of. I have a strong interest myself because my 4 kids are all very into the sports. The 3 oldest are currently involved in a couple of the sports, and we look forward to joining more as we go. And I think that at the end of the day, those sports programs are something that if I'm on the CSD board, I would look to nurture and to support and to find as much agreement and cooperation is really, an open cooperation is really what it comes down to. Now, there's going to be some competition for fields and resources, and but I think if we can all come together, work together as a group, and everybody can be fair and reasonable and work towards the interests of the kids, which is what this is mostly about, and the parents who have to pay the bills. We want to make sure that those costs are not onerous on the community, because, you know, at the end of the day, it's the parents of those kids that are going to be paying increased fees, and I don't think that's necessary. But I know at the same time that the CSD is a public agency, and it has to have written rules, and it has to have written procedures for how it calculates those costs. And so I think it's fair enough that those rules are going to be enforced, and then there's going to be a discussion like happened recently about how to make sure that system is working fairly and efficiently for the community.
Thank you. Michael?
Yes, as I had mentioned earlier, we do need to get the user groups together and take a look at the existing field allocation policy to see what can be done better. I would like to know a little bit more so about what the true costs are associated with the fields that are out there. There's a reason why we have such premier fields that are out there. There's a cost associated with it. So I definitely believe that those costs have to be paid for one way or the other. So, but again, if we can sit down and kind of see what the true costs are associated with each and every field, get a better feel for them, and at that time, take a look and see what we might be able to do a little bit differently in terms of the cost recovery aspect of it.
Thank you. Steve?
Something has to be done with the fields when we don't have enough fields. We don't have enough time for the kids to be able to practice and play. That's just wrong in my humble opinion. And like I say, my grandchildren were this age when I got here, and we've had this problem for a long time. When I talk about cityhood, and we've spoken about this property down here, I call it Iron Horse. I even named it Iron Horse High School. I thought that was a great name. In any case, the Iron Horse runs right by it. That's where the old logging train goes by the Wexel-Oviatt sawmill. And that's 192 acres, and what we're talking about is having this high school built down there, and maybe turning this high school into a junior high school. Now, this is outside of the CSD. I know I'm not talking about CSD right now, but when we do something like that, we can, and I think Louis said it, we can go to companies that build fields. I had a soccer fella tell me, he says, Steve, I will rent your 20 soccer fields at Iron Horse Athletic Pavilion every weekend of the year, 52 weeks of the year. He called me back and says, can't do that. I can only do 48 weeks of the year. Do you know what 48 weeks of competition does for El Dorado Hills? Offhand, every hotel in town is going to be full over the weekend, when right now they are empty. That means tax money coming in here that we can use for our youth. We can't fix this problem as the CSD. We can certainly move forward again and again. It's what we've been doing for 20 years. And I want to see this get fixed really. And I want to, there's some of us in here who've been around a long time, and we want to see it done before we go. Thank you.
Heidi. This is a really tough one, and that's why Mike and I started this subcommittee conversation about digging into the numbers, and that includes the organizations opening their books to us as well, because some organizations actually have a fair amount of money in their budget. So we have some senior citizens who don't really want to, who don't really want to subsidize kids' sports. I think affordable kids' sports is absolutely vital. We have to make sure it saves kids. It makes kids good people. It teaches them discipline. So we have to provide them access to that. And that's why I've been proud of the programs the CSD's offered, like flag football, our basketball program. They're affordable. They're something that all kids, for the most part, can have access to. It gets a little more complicated when we're contracting with organizations. So it doesn't, I don't know on the 100% funding, honestly. I think I'm the only one actually answering the question straight on, but I don't know. But what I do know is we have a group, and we're going through these numbers one by one, and hopefully we'll have some resolution towards the first of the year as to what that looks like. That's fair for all of our residents, seniors, and families. So I'm committed to continuing that conversation.
Thank you. This next question will start with Michael. If you're elected, will you commit to making yourself available to constituents to hear their concerns, perhaps via office hours or responding to emails? Can you commit tonight to direct dialogue with your constituents?
Yes, 100%. I feel as though I've always made myself available, whether it be via email, whether it's text, whether it's phone call, whatever the case may be. I'm here, I'm a resident as well, so I will make myself available to anyone that needs to speak with. All you need to do is reach out and let me know what your concerns are, and let's talk about it. So yes, 100%. I'm here to listen to you and to hear your concerns and what it is that we can do to address them.
Thank you. Steve?
I already published my email address, steve@steveferry.com. My website is steveferry4csd, that's FORCSD, and .com. And so I make myself very available to anybody who wants to talk to me. I'm a retired guy, I've been around a long time, so people like to talk to me because I got a pretty sincere and a real sincere background in this sort of thing. So the answer to that is yes, but I have another thing I want to tell you. The CSD started to do cityhood back about 2020. We brought it to them, our 88 Citizens for Cityhood brought this effort up. The CSD agreed to move forward with cityhood. They moved forward with the first document. They got the first document in. You can read it on the web, and it'll tell you that we're going to be a pretty darn nice, financially good city. We need to order the next documents, and somehow we've stalled out of that because we don't have a survey to say people want this. I am here as that survey. If I lose this cityhood effort is going to be a real, I won't say it'll fail, but boy, it's going to have trouble. But when we win this seat, and that's exactly what I plan to do, I'm going to work hard enough to get that done, and we're going to become a city because this CSD is going to move forward on that if I have anything to say about it at all. And yes, it takes more than one vote. It takes 3 votes. So we need to get the comprehensive feasibility analysis, the CEQA analysis. The total of those two is about $400,000. And this CSD's got to pay for it. And then we run an election time. That election time will be paid for by the public. It cannot be paid for by the CSD. And that'll cost another $300,000 or so. And we want this on the ballot in November 2024. Thank you.
Heidi. So this is an easy one for me because, yes, and I've already been doing that since I've got on the board. My husband just walked in, so probably much to his chagrin, I've probably been out at least 2 days a week having coffees with people, returning phone calls. I'll come upstairs, who are you talking to? And say, oh, it's a resident. I have been really, really proud of the way I've made myself available to people and really, I mean, I've met with people we haven't agreed, and that's not always a comfortable conversation to have. But sometimes just having that meeting and having that opening and being able to tell them why something is the way it is or why it's not that way, or explain maybe some of the facts around something, has always been beneficial. And I've left every single meeting with a positive experience, again, even if we've disagreed. So yes, I'm definitely committed to continuing that, and it's been actually one of the funnest parts of doing this volunteer position.
Thank you. Louis?
Funny story, my neighbor Velma, she was the general manager years ago, and she said that she had to stop going to the grocery store because she got bombarded too often. But I think for me personally, I mean, I've enjoyed the process so far. I've had a chance to go out and meet with all the current board members, some past board members. I've met with some of our county supervisors. I've talked to all the sports, youth sports associations here. I enjoy it. I mean, I'm more than happy to talk to anyone about anything El Dorado Hills at any time, and that's kind of why I'm here. That's what I want to do, and I want to be a conduit for those voices to get action and ways to bring everybody's opinions to the table and find, constructive criticism is very helpful to finding out what's not working, and I'd like to hear that as well.
Thank you. The next question will start with you, Steve. In September, the general manager at the CSD refused to attest the accuracy of the landscape and lighting assessment districts. The auditor controller refused to place the LLAD assessments on the property taxes, costing EDH more than $1 million in lost revenue. How would you work to resolve this situation and improve the working relationships on such matters, including the ongoing issue with the Heritage Park Stadium lights?
When I first sat down here and started speaking with you, I spoke about the lawsuits. There's a lawsuit over the Heritage Park, and the lawsuit is about 50-foot lights that are out there that look like they belong in a prison. And I live there, and when I get elected and when I'm seated, I will not be able to talk about that outside of closed session. So I can speak to it right now, though, and we ought to be taking those lights down. That's all those people wanted in the first place. And we ought to figure out some way to put in an 8-foot fence along the line where they have the children's work or the children's play stations. They're up at about 8 or 9 feet. The kids are up at 10 feet looking out at grandma and grandpa getting undressed. And it's just wrong. And so we need to fix that. In any case, that's one of the issues. The second thing you asked about, I'm sorry.
How do we resolve the situation and improve the working relationship on LLAD matters?
The issue with Joe Harn, who's your auditor controller, he's the guy that actually takes these books apart and looks at them and says, we got to fix this. The issue that's going to happen is you're not going to get a bill in November for your LLAD tax. You will, a year from now, get a bill that has an increase in it that makes up for that, because the CSD is going to have to repair whatever that issue is. And I've got the letter here with me. I have all that stuff. They're going to have to repair it, and then they're going to have to raise your taxes to get that paid for. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Heidi?
So this is complicated. The LLAD issue has been, since my first meeting, they were taking a vote on LLAD. Some of the neighborhoods were deciding whether or not to raise their LLADs, and I was going, what the heck is an LLAD? I just got appointed, I didn't understand what it was. Still wrapping my head around it to some extent. On the situation with the auditor controller, I would say there's a difference of opinion as to whether or not the attestation is needed, and I think it's fair that that's being discussed right now. That's not standard practice. Most GMs are not doing an attestation. We get our data from the county, and there are discussions going on with his office, and I'm confident we're going to be able to get to a resolution on it. I wouldn't really call it raising taxes. As Steve said, I think the taxes will be deferred to a later bill when and if we reach resolution on that. Now, as far as LLADs, they continue to be an issue that has to be addressed. We have underfunded LLADs. I mean, you drive around, you can tell which ones are underfunded because all of their landscaping is dying in front of their neighborhoods. Well, that's not something I want to see as a resident. I mean, I drive down Lake Hills and fences don't look great. And it's not my neighborhood, but so who should pay for it? So, you know, I have asked legal and our general manager to do some digging around on the fences specifically. Can those be deeded back to the people? So I'm trying to come up with some creative solutions and how we address this long term, because there is a reckoning. If you were paying $50 in 1970, that doesn't go the same as now. So unfortunately, when some of these LLADs were created so many years ago, they were not forward thinking, and they did not continue to have an inflationary factor. And so we're going to continue to see our landscaping decline around because of it. So I'm going to continue to work on it, and I'm going to stop. Thank you.
Thank you. Louis?
I think that our boulevards and our entrances to our communities are very important to the look and the feel of the community and how everybody feels about how well kept El Dorado Hills is. And I think that there is a lot of good work that's being done to find solutions to these problems with the CSD staff and to look at the details of how these are written and how they need to be coordinated with the county. I've gotten a bit of a short education over the last couple months trying to understand them. They are quite technical and a lot of spreadsheets with a lot of numbers that go on and on. And I think that at the end of the day, I think we're just going to have to take a look at what the needs are, maybe just kind of cut through all the technical mumbo jumbo a bit and understand what we need to do to make this community look right, and then start there and then understand, okay, how are we going to fund that? And there may not be mechanisms to fund that through every LLAD, but you know, there is this is going to be part of the biggest important part of the board is understanding what the priorities are and how do we make sure we use our money efficiently and find other sources to I think that, you know, we want this community to look as good as it can. So having our landscaping and I think El Dorado Hills Boulevard itself is quite nice once you get to a certain spot there by the CSD here. But I think, I've always been very disappointed by, once you get closer to the freeway, that there's just a lot of dirt there. And I've tried to understand that, and I think it's, again, a county issue of right-of-way. They own that, and I don't know why the developers weren't required to make those. I know Serrano did an amazing job on Silver Valley Parkway, and I wish that I had more understanding of why we haven't been able to fund those when Blackstone went in. That should have been probably a part of the required public improvements, but it's probably something we could fix though, still.
Thank you. Michael?
All right, there's no doubt that this is still an area too that I'm still trying to really get a good grasp on. So if I'm still trying to get a grasp on it, I know that there's still a lot of questions out there for our residents on the specifics behind landscape lighting assessment districts. So I would like to see what we can do to, again, look to establish, of course, if the need is there, if the community desires to establish a working group that's specifically around LLADs, how they're made up, how are they determined, what they do, and so forth. It is unfortunate that the auditor did not collect all but one, I believe, of the LLADs, in which case now there's likely going to be some issues and shortfalls, and if that's the case, then of course, then I suppose that the auditor is going to have to take responsibility, be able to be held accountable for that. Because there were some discrepancies in terms of the data that was available on the county website, and we did look into that, and there were discrepancies, in which case we had staff go out and actually confirm that there were some differences in what was reported, in which case, so there were some questions there. So there definitely needs to be some more work done in this area, and I think that we can do it so that we can make them more understandable to everyone. As for the stadium lights, I don't view them as stadium lights. Again, going back to the issue we had earlier in terms of available field space, if they're done right, if they can be done in a way that's in compliance, all the plan reviews have been done, I see no reason for them to be there so that we can make sure that we can get our kids out there and play. And on top of that, the board has already made that decision. It's a dawn to dusk plan, so there's no reason to continue to go down this road anymore. So until if the need changes, then that's something for the future board to determine. But at this point, I feel as though that's settled.
Thank you very much. That's all we have time for our questions from the public. So now we're going to move on to our closing statements, and we will be going in this order. We will start with Louis, then Steve, then Heidi, then Michael. And you have 2 minutes. So Louis, please go ahead.
Well, thank you all for coming tonight. It's been a pleasure. I would say in closing that everyone's brought some really good points. I actually am neighbors with one of Steve's old high school friends, and him and I have been talking about cityhood over the last few years, and I think it's a good thing that we're looking at this again. I know in 2004 there was it was before I was here, and I think that the cityhood as a hot button issue is important to look at. I think the most important thing at the moment is development and managing that development. I mean, we're looking over at Folsom right now, and I swear every time I drive on 50, there's a new hill that didn't used to be there getting graded for housing. As somebody who thinks housing is important, I see that. I'm happy Folsom's doing what they're doing. But I think here in our community, we have a certain kind of feel, and we have an open space kind of atmosphere. I think that it's really important to, I've respected over the last few years what the community's done to kind of step up and voice their concerns about Parker trying to develop the golf course at high density. I know the CSD as a whole and a lot of people in this community have come together to try to make that preserve open space. What Heidi's been doing with the short course has been fantastic. I really hope that they take those good ideas and they can run with them and make them, because that's a central part of and I think the south of 50 area, there's a lot of opportunity for that to be developed into sports fields and athletic and facilities such as swim centers and more athletic fields. I want to push Bass Lake through as much as I can as a board member. I know it's in progress, but I'd like to just jump in and bring any help I can. Overall, just excited about the opportunity to serve our community, and I look forward to being elected.
Thank you. Steve, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. I want to answer a few questions for you that you may have as I close. First of all, thank you for being here. I want to clarify whether this would be the city of El Dorado Hills or the town of El Dorado Hills. They're identical things. At the time that we get a city council elected, they will make the decision what that'll be, or it'll be made prior to that by whoever's running the election thing, but it's not going to be made by me. Secondly, I am not running for city council or mayor when that city happens. I'm just trying to create a city. Does that make sense? Any questions about that? I am not running. There is a lawsuit called Austin versus El Dorado County. El Dorado County lost in Superior Court. They lost again at the Court of Appeal. They owe roughly $33 million, and I'm guessing at that between the millions that are owed here, there's about $5 million here, plus about $28 million up the hill, plus a little bit from the fire department. When you divide that up to the houses that were built from 2004 to 2011, that's roughly 1,200 homes. It's $30,000 a house that's going to be owed to those people if that money gets paid out. And nobody knows it, and if the press is here, I hope you print that, because people in El Dorado Hills need to know that that's out there for them. I would like to note one other thing. again, not necessarily CSD, but this is a vision statement tonight, folks. If the CSD is going to accomplish what we want it to accomplish, it's going to have to become a city. The intersection down here at Highway 50 that doesn't have any landscaping whatsoever was a contract between the county and Caltrans. They built it without having any contract for the landscaping. When we become a city, we can contract, and we could do this with the CSD, but we would have to contract with Caltrans to actually fix that intersection and put some landscaping out there. Thank you again for coming. This has been a lot of fun. I hope you've had as much fun as I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Heidi?
Okay. Thank you again to the League for organizing tonight's forum. There's a speech by Teddy Roosevelt called The Man in the Arena, and I want to read a brief excerpt from it. It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, or the woman. So I want to thank all of my fellow board members for the last year and a half, as well as the candidates for bravely being up here tonight, as we are all trying to do our best in the arena. So I know all of our intentions are good, and to make El Dorado Hills the best it can be. As a public servant for most of my adult life, I want to give back locally now to a place that has given me so much. I know firsthand the quality programs and facilities the El Dorado Hills CSD provides. After all, as I mentioned, I am a former TAS swimmer. In addition to my infamous swim career, my own children have enjoyed many of the CSD's programs, including flag football, basketball, and swim lessons in their youth, to their most recent teen years working with the CSD as volunteers at the Great Fishing Derby, one of my favorites, and at Bass Lake Regional Park. I was also very lucky to work with some of my neighbors. Shout out to Sue Parker and Kim White, the former board and the CSD staff on the creation of the Windsor Point Park in 2013, something I'm really proud of. That experience showed me what can happen when the community and the CSD work together to bring an idea to fruition. Hopefully I've given voters a flavor of who I am this evening, a wife, a mom, a resident who truly loves her town, maybe a town, Steve, and is trying to do the best I can to keep it a wonderful place for years to come. If elected, I will continue to be a diligent steward of our tax dollars and a fair representative here at the CSD. Thank you for your consideration of being here tonight.
Thank you. Michael?
Very good. Well, again, thank you everyone for coming out and hearing us out this evening. You know, thanks again to the voters for again hosting and really putting on this forum. You know, again, as I mentioned in my opening statement, this is a great community. I want to continue to serve this community. I've always wanted to try and figure out ways that I can give back and contribute to this community, despite also being a very busy person, a business owner, a family. You know, all my kids are also involved in a lot of the different programming that's made available because of the CSD. So I apologize if at times maybe I may not be as responsive as maybe you'd like, but I will get back to you as quickly as I possibly can, given all the different elements that are going on. I can say that I am one that, again, will listen, kind of think things through as best as I possibly can, listen to all voices into the room, and try and make the best decision, the right decision, that benefits all those that are concerned. So I will always do what's necessary to roll up my sleeves and continue to work as hard as I possibly can to continue to make this community great. Thank you again for coming out.
Thank you very much. So that concludes our forum here tonight. Thank you so much to our candidates for joining us this evening. We appreciate it. And to our audience, thank you so much for your many questions. We really appreciate your participation in the democratic process. And the League of Women Voters, we're always looking for new members. We have 16 more forums coming before the November 8th election. So you can look us up at lwveldorado.org and you can join us and participate in our nonpartisan voter education efforts. And also, as a side note, tonight, in a couple days or so, this forum will be available on YouTube. We'll post it on our various social media channels. So if you'd like to watch it or share it with someone who couldn't be here tonight, that will be available to you. We also encourage you to visit our online nonpartisan voter guide, Voter's Edge. You type in your address and your entire ballot comes up, along with funding sources, and where you can go and cast your ballot either in person or drop off your ballot on election day or before. So thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
The November election is almost here. You can get ready to vote using the League of Women Voters nonpartisan voter guide called Voter's Edge. Simply visit votersedge.org and enter your address to view your entire ballot, along with the polling locations where you can vote in person or drop off your ballot. Every registered voter in California will receive a vote-by-mail ballot. You may fill it out and mail it in without postage, or you can drop it off at a secure Dropbox location or at a local polling place. Again, the election's almost here. Get those facts before you vote by visiting votersedge.org today. Your vote is your voice. Make sure you get out and vote this election day.